The University of Pretoria Professor of African Politics, Development and International Relations, Christopher Isike, is the National Spokesperson of the Nigerian Union South Africa, NUSA. It is the umbrella body of all Nigerian organizations, associations and unions in South Africa, and he joins us now in studio. Mr. Isike, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for watching and welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and good evening to the viewers.
Campaigning wrapped up today. Let's now focus at the two main contenders, the incumbent president, Muhammadu Buhari, and Atiku Abubakar. Now, both leaders are advocating taking Nigeria to greater heights, but their campaign strategies have been very thin on how that will be possible or how they will implement that. So let's take a look at some of the key policy areas, that's education, health, and the economy. What are both leaders promising with regards to those?
Well, the incumbent president, Muhammadu Buhari, and his party, the APC, have been making big talk around, continuing the fight against corruption, which they argue is a very big impediment to economic growth and development. But like you said, they've not been very big on the issues aside from talking about corruption and ensuring that there is security in the country, which in my opinion they've not been very good at doing. On the other hand, the opposition, the main opposition party, the People's Democratic Party candidate Atiku Abubakar, has given a very good document on what its manifesto, what its program of action would be. Amongst this, it talks about education, it talks about health, it talks about restructuring the country, which I think is a very crucial point.
Yeah, and speaking of corruption, which you went to great lengths in articulating, I mean, Mr. Atiku Abubakar has been implicated in corruption, and his critics point to issues of impropriety or financial impropriety, hence making him unsuitable for public office in a country where corruption is very much rampant. So he's also been advocating towards fighting corruption. Don't you think that's a bit of an anticlimax?
Well, what we hear are allegations about his involvement in corruption. He was part of the ruling party in the last 3 years before he decided to contest for the position of president. He was never touted as corrupt until he became an aspirant. So it will be helpful for those allegations to be tested as far as I'm concerned, and a lot of people who I think neutrally around this, they are just allegations. They've not been tested.
Yeah. And then the incumbent president, what about his competence to run Africa's most populous country and perhaps Africa's biggest economy, given his age, given his ill health, and given the fact that he's been very leaning towards inaction and he's been very slow in implementing some of the policies that he's been campaigning for?
Yeah, it's questionable. Like you said, his health is a big issue. Unfortunately, we have a penchant in Africa, not just in Nigeria, for our leaders not telling us the true state of their health whenever they get, health problems while in office. So the health scare is a major issue. I'm sure you would have heard about how he has, been helped, physically. Of course, given his age, that's not very surprising. However, he's displayed a lot of incoherence during the town hall debates, discussions, chats he had, and also during the campaigns itself. So all of these have tended to make people doubt his mental capability, to continue to run the affairs of the country. And that is a big issue for most of the people who are supporting another 70 years plus, which is a shame, unfortunately, but that is the reality of the Nigerian situation.
It is actually very concerning, given the fact that Nigeria has been fraught with issues of Boko Haram, and now the Niger Delta Avengers, that's another militant group in Nigeria's all-rich southern Niger Delta, has threatened to cripple the country if Mr. Buhari is elected into office. Just how serious are these threats?
Well, they should be taken as seriously as they are made. Interestingly, there are two groups now that have given two different views about his candidacy. There's the one group that say they support him, they endorse him, and then there is this group of today that indicated that they would blow up the oil wells in the Niger Delta if he wins the elections. These are threats, and they should not be taken lightly, because the Nigerian economy is a mono economy, as you know. It's highly dependent on oil for its foreign revenues. So if that happens, it will definitely cripple any capacity the current government has, if it does win the election, for improving the economy and delivering on its promises. So there are threats. I think that given the history of militants in the Niger Delta and the capability they have to blow up wells and generally disrupt the economy, these are threats that should not be taken lightly.
Now, members of the Commonwealth Observer Group have now arrived in Nigeria to observe these elections. Are you at all happy with the observer missions that are currently deployed all over Nigeria?
Yeah, absolutely. These will help to, give the elections some veneer of credibility, and would also, of course, be giving the histories around the role of observer missions in African politics, and in the Nigerian case, where following the suspension of the Chief Justice, the role of foreign agents in trying to advise the country, and the response of the government. It is important that we have those observers, local and international, to observe the elections and give their verdict on how it is conducted. Apparently, how transparent, how much access the INEC, the Independent Electoral Commission, is able to give them to observe the entire process will determine how credible their verdict will be at the end of the day. Previously,
the Nigerian leaders have been elected along the ethnic lines, along religious lines, and it has been a big issue whether Nigeria is being run by a Christian leader or a Muslim leader. So how big of an issue are the ethnic lines or the religious lines when towards deciding who is the right person to lead Nigeria now?
Well, it's always been a big issue. The ethnicization of our politics started in the 70s, and that has continued, and it's also at the core of the problem of Nigeria, the fundamental problem, which many have misdiagnosed as corruption, and that for me is just a symptom of a bigger problem, the bigger problem being the ethnic issue that you talk about, the mutual suspicion that exists between different religious groups and different ethnic groups. So for this election, the good thing about it, and this have some implication for violence, is the fact that both candidates, both the top two candidates rather, are from the northern part of the country, same region, and both of them are Muslims. So it's very unlikely that you're going to have violence usually associated with candidates that come from different ethnics and different religious groupings. So we expect that it will help to temper the amount of violence that will go with the elections and maybe after the election. So it's been an issue, it's a major factor, but it's not going to be such a big issue in these elections because both candidates, the top two candidates, are from the northern part of the country, and they are both Muslims.
All right. Well, what about Nigerians currently living in the diaspora? Do they have a fair role to play in deciding who is supposed to take Nigeria to the next level? I mean, we've seen earlier on, I'm made to understand that some of those living in the diaspora are not supposed to vote, or they will not be allowed to vote.
Yeah, it's correct. They will not be allowed to vote, and it's unfortunate. There's been calls for the diaspora to be allowed to vote. That could not be tidied up before this election. However, the President, Muhammadu Buhari, has promised that it's something that is close to his heart, and that he would look into this, in the subsequent elections. I'm hoping that there will be a law passed by the National Assembly to enable people like us who live outside the country to vote in future elections.
Boko Haram has and still continues to be a major issue in Nigerian politics. So how has the current administration been able to deal with it, and how have the presidential campaign candidates been able to articulate what they're going to do should they take up power to deal with such an issue?
Well, the Boko Haram issue is a big factor, was a big factor in the last elections in 2015. The current party, which was an opposition party then, actually rode to power on the back of the insecurity caused by Boko Haram. And Muhammadu Buhari, being a retired general, had given the impression that he was capable as a general, former general, of dealing frontally with the problem. Unfortunately, this has not been so. If you check statistics from the Nigeria security tracker, you will find that there was a spike in 2014 of deaths related to Boko Haram in Nigeria, which pervaded the insecurity in the country. But it then started normalizing from 2016 to 2018. But if you compare the incidents, the amount of deaths from Boko Haram between 2011 and 2014, and that of between 2016 and 2018, you find that it's actually not been checked at all. It's actually worse. If you add the incidence of the headers, Fulani headers to all of these, you'll find out that more people have died, from these terrorist activities of these groups than has been the case previously. And that puts a huge question mark around the capability of this current government to deal with the Boko Haram issue. And security, apart from the economy, will be another big issue for voters as they go to the polls on Saturday.
Yeah, it poses a really big question mark, as you said, and the group wants self-determination. Do you think the country should concede to this narrative?
Well, I do not think that the group, their mission is for self-determination, because that's not how they started out. Right now, they've become internationalized. They've associated with ISIS, affiliated with them, and they've actually formed a group around the West African region. Their goal really is to declare an Islamic caliphate in line with ISIS thinking. But how that will play out in the Nigerian case, it remains to be seen. But I do not think that they, as a group, because they're not, if you look at the meta-geography of terrorism, you'll find out that they don't have a defined territory right now, although most of the activities are, fixed around the northeastern part of the country. But getting a territory and declaring a caliphate separate from Nigeria, I don't think is their primary objective right now.
Okay, let's talk about the level of interest in Nigerian politics. We've seen a record number of political parties participating in these elections. I mean, it's 70 plus political parties who are running for top office. Does this augur well for Nigerian politics at this point?
Well, look, Nigeria is a country of over, conservative estimates, 160 million people, okay? Right now, there are over 90 political parties with about 70 candidates contesting for presidency. It's not unexpected for a big country like that to have as many political parties, especially when the two major parties since 1999 have continued to, the PDP was dominating the space until recently. So we have two big parties and smaller parties. I think that the time is ripe for dissenting voices to come together and form groups, where at the same time it will help if some of these groups, came together and presented a united front to pose a very serious challenge, maybe not now, perhaps in the future, to the main political parties which are controlled by who people I like to call political grandfathers.
And unemployment amongst the young electorate, particularly the youth, remains very, very high. So what can youth, what's expected of them? What's their role that they can play in these elections? And we've seen quite a record number of young people participating in these elections.
Yeah, that's one of the good things about it. Been very young people coming out, and forcefully so. In the past, youths have always been involved in the Nigerian election from independence, and their role from the 70s started being that of being used as political thugs. However, since the 2014 elections, 2015, sorry, this has changed, with the digitalization of politics. More people are becoming aware and sensitized and mobilizing themselves to participate as candidates and as active voters, because that's one of the areas where they have also been short in terms of actual voting. So if you ask me what should they be doing, I would advise for Saturday, youth should come out and vote and protect their votes. But at the same time, not to take their eyes away from the big picture of asking for restructuring, because fundamentally there's something wrong with the country. And until we address that issue of either restructuring or calling for a codessa of some sort, if you like, that's one thing we've never had, and one thing that's going for South Africa, if you ask me. If the youths continue to push for such an agenda, and from any process that emerges from that, we get a new deal that will make youths equal participants in their political development, then of course we can begin to talk about what role they can play and how the economy can be restructured in their favor.
Okay, we don't have much time, unfortunately. Just a quick one. We are in an era of fake news or inaccurate news, and I would imagine that some propagandists will be on overdrive trying to push their party's agendas and manifestos. So how big is an issue of fake news in Nigeria? And would it be a threat in this election?
Absolutely. It's one of the big issues. One of the questions we're asking about, the key focus for the elections, apart from the preparedness of the INEC, the potential for violence, you know, given the rhetorics we're getting, is the question of fake news. It's been very, very disturbing, the amount of fake news that is on social media, you know, and that will affect the elections directly or indirectly. Fortunately, some of these fake news have been countered. For example, 2 days ago, there was some fake news that the INEC has decided that people will only vote with their index finger, and that was corrected very swiftly. And so these kind of things have a way of, you know, preventing people from either coming out to vote, or general threat of violence that is designed to keep people at home and make them not vote. And that contributes to political apathy, which is one of the things that we hope would not happen in the elections on Saturday.
All right, Mr. Isike, thank you so much for coming through, and we appreciate your insight.